And I remember one of my lecturers saying, we're not cows, we don't graze, and I just always remember that thinking, God, that's a really good point. There's no money in like promoting walnuts, is there?
No, there isn't.
But there's money in promoting statins. So the body almost thinks like it's in a fight-flight situation. It feels like it's in a fear situation when you're having these spikes and crashes. 15, 20, 30 listed ingredients
on a simple product. That's a lot of additives.
Right? You're just, wow, there aren't that many nuts in this world to like have that in let's say, a protein bar. So you have a shot of that in the morning, and that will help.
Empty stomach?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I would say no to that.
Welcome to the Visionary podcast, where we discuss science, medicine, physical health, and mental well-being. Annie, thanks so much for coming to see us for the second time. This is the second session for this episode, just in case our viewers are wondering why we look a little bit older, maybe grayer.
Yeah, just a touch.
We'll talk about all things food, nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. Annie, you advocate managing type 2 diabetes and even reversing it using food modifications. And how can this be done, please? Could you walk us through this?
Yeah. Well, obviously I've been looking at someone's diet. Since I started as a nutritional therapist, CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, have become more available. And so I would initially suggest to a patient to actually get hold of a CGM so they can start to monitor and see how their bodies are affected by the foods that they actually eat, rather than me immediately going into changing their diet. Because I think that the way that people really respond the best is to tweak what they're already doing, but also to take ownership and to see, oh, well, if I'm having porridge in the morning, actually, when I have it just with berries, I get a real glucose spike. And then if I add nut butter to that porridge, then it modifies and modulates and lessens and dampens that glucose response. And so they can start to almost be their own investigator. And I think when it comes to nutritional therapy anyway, I think that actually people who have more control over what they're doing themselves and take more ownership really are the ones that will have sustainable change. So that's initial. And then obviously I sort of educate them and talk to them about, it isn't just about sugar, it's also about starch, because starch in itself converts to sugar in the body, and then will cause a glucose response. So something like white bread or white pasta will also sort of spike their glucose and sort of add to the problem. And obviously the whole issue with diabetes is the reaction to the insulin, and the insulin becoming far too resistant and not sort of coming into play.
Please explain to us this idea of insulin when it comes to type 2 diabetes. What does resistant mean?
Yeah, it just basically means that so the cells in every body, the cells in the body, they all have insulin receptors, and so when we have any kind of food that contains any kind of glucose or starch, the cells will receive that information and go, okay, that's a lot of sugar, or that's a little bit too much sugar, and then send a message to the brain to send a message down to the pancreas to produce insulin. Okay. Insulin then gets produced, and insulin then comes in and will deal with the excess sugar by opening up the cells and allowing the sugar to be absorbed into the brain and the muscles and the liver. What happens when we have too much sugar is that the body becomes, well, the receptors themselves in the cells kind of go, well, hold on a minute, these guys have, I keep getting asked to produce insulin. I keep getting asked and asked and asked and asked. And in the end, the cells just become resistant. They go, do you know what? It's all too much. I cannot deal with it any longer. And so it will produce like loads and loads of insulin. So that you don't have that sort of tweaking of too much insulin or too little insulin, responding to too much sugar or too little sugar. You just have a kind of whole host of just too much insulin.
And that's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing, because basically, in the end, the pancreas will stop producing that insulin, because it's just like, okay, I've had enough. I'm not going to produce anymore. I'm not going to be that sensitive. And so you then have the sugar running around the bloodstream, causing havoc, basically causing inflammation. I mean, sugar on the outside is sticky, sugar on the inside is sticky. And so those the cells and the arteries and everything within the actual body becomes highly inflamed, basically. And that's why you get things like neuropathy, which is basically where you have one thing that the sugary sort of bloodstream sort of will promote is the nerves in the body to become quite sort of inflamed, and eventually you get literally like areas in your body, areas like especially in your feet, where they start to literally die, and that's why you have amputations, because there's just no more lovely flowing bloodstream going to those extremities, which is the worst scenario. And people also lose their sight. It's another sort of the retinas are quite sensitive to insulin resistance, and so you can lose your sight and become blind when you're very diabetic.
It's so hard to believe that all this mess starts with the sugar and the rice and the pasta and the white bread and these kind of things.
Well, those in themselves are probably fairly innocent bystanders. They get caught up in the mix. The problem is all the other processed foods that are also
in addition to all
that. Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, you can reduce your insulin resistance just by, when you eat, going for a 10-minute walk afterwards. Just by having a bit of movement, it helps with the actual glucose monitoring, and it helps to sort of helps the insulin receptors to just become a bit more sensitive. So you really want insulin sensitivity. You don't want insulin resistance.
So let's say I stick to protein and vegetables only in my main meal. How much of an insulin spike will I get?
Not a lot. Not a lot. If you were wearing a CGM and you'll be eating like that, you would find that you don't really get an insulin response. And you can literally see it as a flat line on your chart within your app. So there's also a food for thought to say that acetic acid, so acid from
vinegar.
Yeah. All vinegars other than balsamic, because balsamic tends to be kind of concentrated, so it has got a concentrated sugar aspect to balsamic vinegar, especially the ones that are like glazing balsamic, so they're not so potent in terms of the acetic acid. But something like any kind of white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar, or apple cider vinegar.
How do I consume that?
Well, that's the thing. So a lot of people, and it's become a real trend, especially with there's some brands out there like Willie's who sort of advocate that you have a shot of that in the morning, and that will help.
Empty stomach?
Yeah.
Oh, and
I would say no to that, actually. I would say for a number of reasons. It's an empty stomach, and yes, it does potentially ignite the agni. In Ayurvedic medicine, agni is the digestive fire. So it does, in some respects, promote digestive fire to help with digestion in the morning, but it is also very erosive to the enamel on your teeth. So I would say be very, very careful to make sure that if you are going to have a shot of any kind of vinegar at any time of the day, especially in the morning, please dilute it with at least 150 mils of water.
That was my assumption, obviously.
No, people don't. And I was at the Pig Hotel not so long ago, and there was a lovely bank with the breakfast bar with lots of different Willies or different other vinegars, and the little shot glasses next to it. So the assumption is that you just take a shot, and I would say no to that. I would say have it, but be very mindful that it can erode your enamel on your teeth. So just if you do, just make sure you're rinsing out lots and lots of water afterwards. But ideally, again, looking at the Mediterranean diet, looking towards like the French culture, the Italian culture, you're dressing your salad with some sort of vinegar, and that in itself is going to help modulate the glucose response within the food that you're eating. So not only are you creating that mesh-like experience to promote nutrient sequencing, but you're also then adding acetic acid into the mix, which is also going to help manage the glucose response. Okay. So that's really how I would approach that. But when it comes to diabetes, there are food for thoughts in regards to ketogenic diet, and I'm sure, Hala, probably more than I do about ketogenic diet, because that's something you advocate. But it's
tell me, that was actually one of my questions. We touched slightly on the keto diet. Are there any risks, negatives, precautions that I should be aware of?
I mean, yes, because I think with extreme ketogenic diets, they tend to be aversive to fiber. So they won't necessarily have fruits, and they won't necessarily have vegetables. I
thought it's extreme is vegetables and protein.
That's extreme, it's just like a lot of protein,
even
a lot of fat.
Vegetables.
Yeah. I mean, and actually, also hormonally for women, some ketogenic diets can affect, their hormones as well. So I think number one, you definitely need to be having fruits as well as vegetables when you're on a ketogenic diet. Now, I'm not saying go and have a mango that's 56 grams of sugar per 100 grams necessarily, but you can still have that in moderation. But I would say that, you know, berries are quite low in sugar, and, you know, they have, fiber attached to them. The cellulose wall is still attached. And so they have, you know, and they're obviously full of antioxidants. So I wouldn't say don't have fruits when you're on a ketogenic diet. When it comes to eating fruits, I would say two things to that. Generally, I suggest that when you do eat fruit in any diet, you have it during the day rather than the evening, because it's more likely to ferment, and fermenting in the evening can cause bloating and distension and flatulence, and that's not so great.
I treat it as a treat after my meal.
Yeah, and that's the right time to have fruit as well, because you can have fruit. And when I'm talking about in the evening, that's fine to have like a 6 o'clock dinner and then have a piece of fruit. But later on in the evening, I would say be careful, because it can ferment. But the other thing is what they say, and what you're potentially doing when you're having it after a meal, is you're putting cloves on your carbohydrate. So if I was to have an apple, I would tend to have an apple with a little bit of cinnamon, which also actually cinnamon is a great way of, it helps to modulate and control glucose response, but then have that with nut butter on the side. So I dip the two in together, and then that way I'm getting protein and fats alongside the carbohydrates. So
why is this important?
Because it slows down the release of the sugar in the actual carbohydrate. Okay. Yeah. So again, even though it's a fruit and it has lots of antioxidants and lots of fiber, and in as a whole fruit, it's very healthy. You know, some people can be a little bit funny about fructose, and be a bit sort of, especially ketogenic diet. And so again, a way to sort of feel okay about having fruit within a ketogenic diet is to put cloves on it. So have your fruit with
fatty cloves.
Yeah. Fatty cloves, protein-rich cloves. So, you know, such as Greek yogurt, full-fat Greek yogurt, or, you know, nut butters, that type of thing. So it's sort of really, again, helping to dampen down the release of the sugar within the bloodstream.
That's the main goal.
That's the main goal, especially when we're dealing with diabetes, because we want people to eat healthily within their sort of new routine. Obviously, it's, you know, diabetes, you know, if driven potentially by excess alcohol or, you know, excess ultra processed foods, that's obviously the first thing that we work on to help reverse diabetes. But then it's also these other nuances to putting cloves on your carbohydrates, having acetic acid, going for walks after you've eaten, those sort of things that we add to the actual mix in terms of the diet protocol that we would look to sort of promote within nutritional therapy.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Hala, your host today. If you're enjoying what you see, please hit that lovely subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me and my team. Or maybe it's more now. We're still learning, we're still finding our feet, but with your support, we can build this channel. Let's take this journey together, one step at a time. Thank you so much for being part of it. I see those slim teenagers buying things at the bakeries and apparently of a good weight, reasonable weight, but I still wonder whether they are healthy or not, because I always see them there buying pastries. Can someone be slim and of reasonable weight and at the same time have a tricky relationship with insulin?
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
How was that?
Well, because you don't have to, your sort of promotion of putting adipose tissue on when you're eating excess calories is related to many factors. So yes, it is genetic potentially to some degree. We, you know, in terms of like the FTO gene, which is like a famine gene that we have. But also, if you're, you know, you could be a marathon runner and having a lot of like monster drinks, for example, to give you energy, which would still be promoting type 2 diabetes, but you're running off the excess energy. So you can still be slim, but your insulin, your pancreas could still be struggling to produce enough insulin to deal with the request from all the energy drinks that you're having, which are high in sugar and high in caffeine. So you can definitely still be having some sort of diabetic event, even if you're slim, because the organs are still behaving in the way that anybody's organs would be behaving.
Okay. Well, would the spikes and dips of insulin affect my mood?
Yeah, because your adrenal system is linked to your energy system, and so what happens really with your adrenal system and your mood. So your hormones are obviously attached to your adrenal system, and they affect your moods. And so what you're having is when you get spikes, you're getting highs, and then when you're getting...
That's an energy.
Energy spike. And then when you're getting lows, in terms of like not so much a hypoglycemic reaction, that's when you have something like type 1 diabetes, where you're getting real low hypos. But you'll still get a aspect of that low, and that will cause moods to drop to feel depressed, to feel low, to feel unmotivated, and then obviously also potentially feel hangry. And then when you feel hangry, you tend to sort of grab anything you can, usually something quite high in sugar, quite easy to grab, something very convenient.
Yeah, to satisfy the need, right?
Yeah, and then you spike up again, and all of that will affect your moods as well, because you're just sort of, your stress response is reacting to, because what happens is the body almost thinks like it's in a fight and flight situation. It feels like it's in a fear situation when you're having these spikes and crashes.
Why is that?
Because it's attached to the adrenal system. So the adrenal system is all about stress response, and then energy is also about reactiveness. So they're just completely linked. So you just get these hormone releases because you're getting cortisol spiking, and cortisol is responsible for stress response. So you're getting these hormonal responses the whole time through. So it's just a bit of what we call a roller coaster.
It sounds like it.
And often I'll find in clinic, before I see a patient, I always get them to fill out a food diary. And I also get them to fill out a body scan that enables me to see what other aspects of their systems are being affected by their current diet. And they always correlate that. I'll get sort of like, they're getting low motivation, lack of concentration, getting upset, feeling tired, then having energy. And then I look at their diet and it's very glucose heavy, and not a lot of protein, definitely not a lot. It tends to never really have enough fiber. And so we tweak that diet initially, and their moods change and they feel like they've got actual decent amounts of energy, and it's sustained energy. So they're feeling like they're not kind of like tired and wired, like up and down, because their blood sugar levels are balanced, because energy is energy.
Yes.
And the food we get, the energy we get from food is the energy that makes us fueled.
Yeah, of course.
So it needs to be balanced so that we have a balanced,
steady,
measured mindset, and
that's a goal.
Yeah.
How important is meal timing for those struggling with diabetes? Is snacking bad for them?
Well, it's very independent, because, you're trying to wean people off quite a sort of damaging inflammatory diet. So sometimes we need to keep snacking in, but it's about what we are snacking on. So ideally, I remember when I had my training back at College of Naturopathic Medicine in 2014. And I remember one of my lecturers saying, we're not cows, we don't graze. And I just always remember that thinking, God, that's a really good point. And I find personally that if I balance my breakfast, lunch and dinner, I do not graze at all. I don't need to graze because my blood sugar level is balanced and therefore my energy level is balanced. But some people, depending on how much calorie they need, can find it's difficult to get enough calorie into each 3 meals, so they may need something in between. And also if they're shift working, shift working is a whole host of issues when it comes to something like diabetes. It definitely drives diabetes. Shift
people
working.
Traveling, commuting every day or something.
Commuting's okay. It's the shift working, because there's whole circadian. Because also the other thing that's linked to all of this is your circadian rhythm. Yeah. So if your melatonin and your cortisol, they're completely linked to everything too. So if that's disrupted, then it tends to be that it's like, when do I eat and what am I eating? And, how am I getting my calories in at 3:00 in the morning when I'm on a shift in a hospital, for example? It's very tricky. And, I do see patients that have that kind of lifestyle, that kind of work. And we have to turn everything around upside down and on its head. And have to be even more organized about how we start that shift and how we end that shift.
Do you snack yourself?
Not hugely. Okay. To be honest with you.
Someone have to snack. And long hours of going somewhere. Yeah. What should they snack on?
Well, nuts, fruit. There are some energy bars that are okay.
What should they look out for with these energy bars? Things that shouldn't be there?
I think when you look at the list, if sugar is in the sort of first 3 ingredients on that list of ingredients within that bar, then I would avoid it. Okay.
No sugar.
But also, sugar, but maybe further down in the list, perhaps. And, it depends on what sugar it is. So if it's like high fructose glucose syrup, then I would say definitely no thank you, because it's very inflammatory. But if it's something like a coconut sugar, then I would say, okay, that's fine in moderation. What a lot of these bars are also using is chicory root fiber syrup, which I'm a big fan of, actually.
Really?
Yeah, because what's lovely about chicory root fiber syrup is that it's a fiber and it's not a sugar. So the sweetness
so
comes.
it's sweet.
It's sweet, but it's a fiber. So for a 5-gram teaspoon of chicory root fiber syrup, it has 3.4 grams of fiber and 0.46 grams of sugar for a teaspoon. So if you're kind of one of those people that really want to have a little bit of sweetness within, let's say, a yogurt, they want to put some honey on top. And honey in moderation is fine, but there's a big conversation about honey separately. But you can use chicory root fiber syrup instead, and that will give you lovely sweetness without actually any sugar spike at all, because it doesn't really have hardly any sugar in it, and you're getting 3.4 grams of fiber.
Oh, that's amazing. I often see that in stores. There's also the organic version, by the way, and I used to avoid it, but now maybe I shouldn't. But you were just referring to the start of the ingredient list and the very end, and some people don't know the significance of that. If you could please explain this.
Yeah, so the ingredients list is listed in sort of quantity that's used within the actual product. So the highest amount of quantity of what have you, let's say it's a chocolate bar, one would hope that the highest quantity in that chocolate bar is actually chocolate, but you'd be surprised to know that,
They start with sugar.
Well, the fact is dairy milk isn't allowed to be called chocolate. That's why it's called dairy milk, because it doesn't have hardly any chocolate in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you find that with a lot of these Cadbury's chocolate bars, they're not actually called chocolate per se, which is true.
There's no milk, there's no chocolate, there's
there's some dried milk, and you will, okay, so the chocolate bar I would buy, let's say Hue Kitchen, I think it has 3 ingredients in it. And obviously one of them will be sugar, but it will...
Coconut sugar,
coconut sugar.
I like that.
And, it's got a huge amount of cacao in it. So, and that is the first ingredients. But generally also the other thing to look at when it comes to ingredients list is if you've got more than 5, 6, depending on what you're buying, 5 or 6 ingredients. If it's got sort of like 15, 20, 30 listed ingredients
on a simple product, that's a lot of additives.
You're just, wow, there aren't that many nuts in this world to like have that in let's say, a protein bar. So I think you just have to actually, and people think, oh, well, I haven't got time, I'm in a rush, I go to the shops or what have you. Find the time, because this is food you're putting in your body and you're fueling yourself. And this is so, so important for your health overall and for the longevity of your life and the health span of your life. So
it's one process. I tell myself that when I was trying to find chocolates for my child, I actually bought her the Hue chocolate once, and she half liked it, but all their products, as far as I know now, it's only dark chocolate, and she's not a fan of that. So I'm just waiting for them to create the milk chocolate so I can buy it for her. But so it's a research that I would do once for a certain kind of product, and that's all really. Not that it didn't take a long time for me.
Yeah. The other thing to say really is about taste buds and the fact that they do change over time. As you say 7 times with sort of adapting those taste buds to get used to the new texture, flavour. And so I know from my daughter, my eldest, who would always be a big fan of creamy milk chocolate, she is very happily enjoying her Hue hazelnut version now, and she hasn't really looked back, and I don't think she really ever buys milk chocolate anymore. But it and it didn't take that long to change her and convert her. So I think it's about exposure as well.
Do you know, again, as far as I know, as far as my nerdy research has taken me so far, that there is no milk chocolate in the market, in the UK market, without sugar. There is milk chocolate without sugar. And I actually had a chat with a chocolate maker here in Tunbridge Wells in the market, the local market. And she told me why. Because when they make chocolate, they don't make it from scratch. I mean, there are lovely chocolates out there, but we import the chocolate buttons from Peru and South America and these places. So the chocolate is already there. Then you add whatever the essences, whatever you want to add, or the nuts. But the chocolate itself, we don't make it. And we do not import any chocolate milk without sugar. It just, apparently it doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like we make things completely from scratch. We're based on the buttons, and we don't have these chocolate buttons without sugar.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I once saw a supplement ad that promotes, okay, have these supplements before your meal, eat whatever you want, how much ever you want, and you will not gain weight. It sounds absolutely rubbish, but I want to explore this with you still. It was some sort of fiber.
Okay.
Does this make any sense? Ring any bells?
Well, I think weight is totally separate. So will fiber slow down the glucose response? Yes. Okay. But will
all kinds of fiber?
I mean, there are soluble fiber, like inulin or psyllium husk. It helps to create that barrier, that mesh, but then also cellulose fiber as well. So, like kale or lettuce and vegetables, that also creates, a nice barrier. So any fiber really will help to slow down the release of the carbohydrate. But in regards to weight, to preventing weight gain, it's just like throwing a pebble into a sea. We just don't, everyone is so individual, and it's like, well, okay, so that means you can eat, 2-3 plates worth of this food after you've had this one pill? I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that, I think.
I don't think so. Yeah. I think anything that's too good to be true is, guess what? Too good to be true.
Is there any insulin misconception that drives you mad when you hear it?
Oats are bad for you. I would say people will kind of not want to eat oats because they think,
that's me. Tell me.
Yeah, there we go. I think it depends on the oat. I mean, if it's a jumbo oat or like a rolled oat, then it's got a lot more of its fiber attached rather than a ready break, which is like a powder. So anything like a powder form of an oat is going to release its sugar very, very quickly and then give you a glucose response. But something like a rolled oat is a slow releasing, creates more of a mesh-like situation, takes longer to be digested and therefore release its energy slower. But, some people are more sensitive to starch like oats than others. And I think a CGM is helpful for them because it enables them to then see and monitor, am I actually getting that response?
Would you recommend blood sugar monitors for the regular Joe?
No, I don't think so. And I've not used one personally myself, considering that I think it's useful for people that are, pre-diabetic and diabetic. Because I think that as long as you have the tools to know how to slow the release of that carbohydrate down, like what I've been saying about putting clothes on carbohydrates and, eating fiber before, other carbohydrates. I do think that you can tell yourself, and that's about being intuitive. So you can tell yourself if I'm getting a glucose response to something or not.
I could feel it actually when that happens. Not necessarily in a bad way because I have a good diet, but when I consume something high in sugar,
yeah, you get a little bit. Yeah, my youngest
I do enjoy it sometimes, I could feel it.
Yeah, my youngest gets like that, and she couldn't feel it immediately, and she gets almost like a bit of a headache. So I think intuitively, if you want to be intuitive to your body and curious about your own body, then just listen to it and listen to the triggers. And then so because CGM again, people necessarily don't want to have something stuck to their arm for 2 weeks, and also it costs a certain amount of money, and so I don't like to promote everybody to have something, because I just think that actually if we just go back to the bare basics of life, of being intuitive, be mindful about what you're putting in the trolley, be mindful about when you're choosing to eat your foods, and sitting down and making sure that your brain is connected to your gut and that you're actually noticing that you're eating food, and then noticing how you feel after you've eaten that food. Am I feeling buzzy? Am I feeling wired? Or am I feeling modulated? Am I feeling measured? When I started my day this morning with 2 slices of small sourdough with a little bit of butter and 2 boiled eggs. I had a matcha and a cappuccino.
Nice.
And I probably had that, I don't know, maybe 7 o'clock this morning. I don't know what time it is now, but I don't feel like I'm...
Yeah, eggs is protein and it fills you up nicely. It's high on the satiety level.
Yeah.
I purposefully try not to walk down the aisles and buy things, especially when I'm hungry, of course. So I stick to the list on my Sainsbury's or Tesco now, because I eat organic, so Tesco's my thing.
Yeah.
The favorites. Never look beyond the favorite. That's where I know that I can consume, that I like, and never go beyond. Because it's so alluring, and the marketing tactics, grabbing your attention left and right, and buying things that...
But you've got to have an 80-20 attitude as well, though, because otherwise it gets very boring, very dull.
It is boring, yeah.
And with patients, and with myself, I don't want to have a boring diet. I love food, and that was the reason why I became a nutritional therapist, because I love food. I love the joy it brings people. I love the love that I give to people, but also I love the love I give to myself from the food that I eat. And sometimes, like say at the moment, my thing is to have a little mochi ball.
Mochi ball?
Mochi ball, yeah.
What is that?
Mochi is it's a Japanese, it's like a rice, a sort of, I don't know what the actual exterior dough is made of.
Is it a grain?
It's like a little ice cream ball, tiny, like a very small ball. And it comes in like pistachio or chocolate or have you. And then it's wrapped in like this kind of very soft dough. I think it's made of rice, but and they're not very sweet. And what I do with them is I will take one and I'll cut it in half. And then at the moment, my favorite thing is pistachio nut butter, just pure pistachio, nothing else in it. There's no sugar. And I just pop a little bit on each one. And that's when I eat my mochi ball after I've had my dinner. I don't have it every day, but I have it because life's too short. It gives me joy. They are delicious.
I know.
I think they've got like 7 grams of sugar in one mochi ball. But then again, if I'm putting the nut butter on top, it slows down the release of the sugar. I've already had the meal beforehand to create the mesh, so I'm okay about it.
Yeah, but I don't do moderation well. That's I know my flaws. Yeah. I know how like my sin is nuts. I think I mentioned that zillions of times, but it's not because I'm eating nuts. And I buy them organic and everything. Yeah. But a bag of 300 grams of that ends in one session. It's really? A lot of nuts. Okay. And if my past self, if I eat bread, it's not one slice or two. I'm not good at that. I just, I found myself useless when I tried to stop myself from eating anything sugary or pastries.
Yeah. I wonder whether you're a little bit leptin resistant. Because leptin is the hormone that tells you that you're full. Okay, so GLP-1 hormone replacement is basically behaving like a leptin hormone, because what it does, it's like a switch off. It's like the brake on the car. It tells you, okay, I'm full. Ghrelin tells you that you're hungry. Leptin tells you that you're full. And if you can become leptin resistant, or you maybe genetically you may be slightly leptin resistant, and so if you don't have that switch off, it's very hard to modulate and stop the snacking.
But it also tastes good. The fatty taste of things,
and
rice,
maybe that's also to do with dopamine, right? Because that's a reward center in your brain.
Because I never get that when I get to diet.
So we love that kind of. Yeah, I mean, it is. I do have patients that have a difficulty in knowing when to stop. But I think that as long as we've got, I find if each meal is balanced with the right level of macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, then they tend to, their satiety, their leptin comes in and tells them that they're full. And then they're not looking to continue. I know that there is dopamine also looking for reward. And maybe we need to look at distraction of dopamine. So rather than rewarding with food, we reward with other things that are also equally as lovely, but it might just be a massage. It might just be a walk with the dog. But, and that can sort of distract you from the continuous snacking.
You will be glad to know that I started having sweet potatoes at the end of my meal. Okay. And the only reason I found that justifiable is that I'm not going to put the oven on more than once, right? I cut half of it, I put it in the oven, and that's it. But something as convenient as nuts or seeds, I can't stop myself. Yeah. It just doesn't. Tell us why. I know this is a question for a psychologist, but you might help us. Why is it so difficult to change our habits? I mean, you're telling us now that type 2 diabetes is not necessarily a lifelong condition, and it can be put into remission with the right nutrition. But this means that I'll have to change, more likely have to change my diet into a healthy diet. I know I'm as stubborn as I get. Why is it so difficult to change our habits?
Well, I think you've pinpointed it there. I think the people are stubborn. People don't want to be told what to do. We have this whole adverse kind of idea about nanny culture, nanny society, being told how to live, being told what to do. People want to have their demographic right to choose what they want to put on their plate, choose what they want to buy, and that's all fine. And no one's saying don't. But when you come to me in my clinic, I think you've already crossed the line of saying I am completely, I'm unable to manage my own choices in life, own choices in my own behavior is out of control, and I'm aware of that. And that's when you're coming to me, and then we're working together about not just the food that we eat, but the behavioural change. And I really love James Clear's Atomic Habits the book Atomic Habits.
Yeah, I've listened to that on Audible.
Yeah, have you on Audible? Yeah, I've read, and it's great because it's a way of sort of approaching habit stacking and habit modification. So you're changing the habits. So we don't have to be stuck with the same unhealthy habits. So the unhealthy habit could be that when I get home from Friday night and I've had a terrible week at work and I'm exhausted and I'm going to just pour that well-deserved glass of wine, right? That's a habit. But what we can do is we can look at that habit and go, look, that's fine. You can still reward yourself. But let's firstly understand, what does that reward actually look like? It's with alcohol. And is alcohol actually a reward? Is it giving you health, or is it damaging you? And then we discuss that and we understand what alcohol actually does to our body. And then we look at, well, I'm not going to tell you not to have a glass of something, but let's replace that. Let's look at alternatives that are not high in sugar, because there's Noveco that is very high in sugar, and I'm not a fan of that personally. But there are many alternatives, and actually so much of the habit or ritual of, let's say, having that glass of wine is getting the glass out, is pouring opening up the bottle, is pouring it. And actually, if you just do the same sort of habit physically, but you're choosing to pour something that isn't alcohol per se, like a wild flower botanical, I can't remember what it's called now. But it's a lovely sort of wine. Amy does a alcohol liberated rosé, sparkling rosé, for example. You're still having the ritual. You're still sitting down. You're still chatting with your spouse. You're still unwinding from the week, and that's part of the ritual too. But you're just changing that habit slightly, modifying it, which is what Atomic Habits is all about. Minute changes to your lifestyle, changing your behavior. It's the same with smoking. It's just a crutch, because life's a bit hard out there, right? I mean,
it's a wild
there's a
west.
lot going on in the world, and people need to have a bit of happiness,
release.
But we don't want to damage our health in the process, and that's the thing that we don't quite realize we're doing with the habits of choices of foods or choices of drinks that we're currently taking or making, and I think that's the thing that I love waking up on a Saturday morning and I literally still consciously think to myself, did I have a drink last night? And then I go, no, I haven't got any kind of hangover. I actually slept well. The Oura ring helps, to be fair, because that tells me that I've got a good amount of sleep, and I know that as soon as I have a drink, it affects my sleep, and that is a real put off. So I think, it's small habits will over time become a behavior change.
Yeah, well, we're so set in our ways. We're too tired, we're too busy, we don't like to change. Actually, some of us are scared of change.
Yeah.
I'll be asked to work harder, I will be restricted, I'll be deprived of all the good stuff and all the frustrations that would come with that. To me, the biggest health myth that you would like people to stop believing?
Well, one thing is, if we're just talking about alcohol, is red wine is super good for us. That's a health myth.
Just because it comes from grapes, right?
Because it will contain an antioxidant called resveratrol. And resveratrol is a really great antioxidant. But my God, you need to drink a lot of red wine in order to get that.
And they do.
Yeah, well, some people do. I mean, I think it's probably quite difficult to drink a lot of red wine, actually.
Yeah.
I think people can drink a lot of spirits because they can go down quite quickly.
Would everything in moderation be a health myth?
Not everything. I would say there are some things I wouldn't have at all, like donuts. But that's just me personally. Would it really damage me to have a donut? No. But I'd rather not. I mean, I think the thing is that it's very difficult to moderate those kind of unhealthy foods.
But they are addictive.
They are very addictive. They give you a lovely little dopamine response and, ask you for more. But they're just packed with the kind of foods that are also very damaging. So it's the palm oil and then the sort of high fructose glucose syrup, and then the actual process of, let's say, deep frying it and, in probably an oil that has been used multiple times and then has become oxidized, because that's another issue. So there's just layer upon layer upon layer of issues when it comes to something like that donut, which, will come in a pack of 6 in, Sainsbury's and bought for a kid's party. So it's just sort of, and won't really have, no one would look at the ingredients list on something that's pre-packed by Sainsbury's, just in a little plastic carton. But the reality is that even in moderation, I think that's quite a damaging food. But, we live, and, we're all going to die of something, ultimately. But,
it's really positive.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, but it's like,
I
life
like
is
it
life.
that we're aware. We have to be aware. We have to educate ourselves, but cut ourselves a slack.
Yeah, you've got to cut yourself slack. I mean, 80-20 is what I was always taught at university during my course, and I think that holds true now. I will have some crisps, but I'll choose to have the olive oil ones that are made with
or the baked ones instead of the fried, right?
Ones. No, I don't mind the fry, but you can get it in olive oil. Waitrose do one.
Okay.
It's just olive oil. And look, again, I wouldn't have a whole bag. I would put some in a bowl, and that would be what I have. And that was probably my Friday night, Saturday night sort of treat, per se. But I wouldn't be cracking open the Doritos. I wouldn't be cracking open the Pringles, because they are an entirely different beast.
I had loads and loads of these in my younger days.
Yeah,
no one ever told me. Everything's tasty. In that category, everything is yummy.
Yeah, I know. I have a 21-year-old daughter. I mean, she loves all that kind of stuff. But it's just, it's funny, because as you become more aware, but also when you eat food that is actually real, when you are then presented with food that isn't real, it's a real put off, and actually you end up going, actually, I'd rather not. I'd rather abstain. You'll go to like a Christmas party, and maybe it'll be stuff that's been bought from Marks and Spencer's, and they laden everything with this, that, and the other, and and I just look at it, it's just brown, like sausage rolls and different sort of canapes and stuff like that, and I find it very sad. I mean, the sad,
it's party food.
The sad diet is this, the standard American diet was what we say. So it's not appealing. Personally, I don't find it appealing, and it's actually funny because last night I was watching Love Island with my daughter, and the McDonald's advert came on, and it's just an image of I think it's just a cheese quarter pounder, and it's got egg. I think it's egg muffin or something like that. And it's got egg, and then it's got the burger, then it's got the cheese, and it's in a bun, and it's just that image on the TV. And honestly, I look at it and I think that is the most unappealing image I could ever imagine. It's like a congealed egg. Okay, It doesn't even look like an egg. It's just like, you can see it's just been dried. And then the cheese is just like, obviously not real cheese. It looks like cheese. It just looks like it's just like cream on the actual bun. And I said to my daughter, like, do you find that, what do you think? She says, no, it's just the taste. It's just the taste, Mum. And I was like, and then my husband was like, yeah, it just tastes of salt. That's all you can taste. That's all you taste is salt. But you just think, gosh, these adverts, are just like there in your face, like properly in your face, just the whole screen full of this one image. And I think that it's so difficult for people. I think it's so...
Absolutely. Marketing techniques are so powerful.
It's just...
You get the cartoons, packaging for children, the sweets at checkout, and the misleading, like you get the highly processed foods with healthy, labeled as healthy, just because they have met a certain low calorie or low fat threshold, and you think it's healthy, but it's not.
Or it's fortified with vitamins. And actually what I learned many years ago is if you were to like put, let's say, children's Rice Krispies into like a food blender, and it's been fortified with iron, okay, and you actually then whiz it up in a food blender, at the bottom you'll see the filaments of iron. So it's not even absorbable elemental iron, it's actually just iron.
That's so sad.
So worried. And they get away with all of this.
There's lots of things.
All of this food industry. Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah, no, we will talk about that.
Okay.
But just a tiny note about omega-3. We had a small chat on our first session about omega-3. I told you that I consume a piece of salmon every day to manage my flexural psoriasis. And I tried to replace that with omega-3 supplements, and it didn't have like the proper positive effects. So you told me what is the source of the omega-3, and apparently there is a certain fish that I should be looking out for. Please tell us about that.
I would rather go with omega-3 that is sourced from sardines and anchovies and mackerel, because they have the most omega-3 in them, rather than there are some, well, certainly cod liver. I wouldn't go with the omega from cod liver source. Pollock is probably fine. Pollock.
Oh, pollock, yeah.
But for me personally, I go with anchovy, sardine. That's generally what. And if I promote a supplement to a patient, I would promote a supplement that has harnessed, that type of omega-3 from that type of fish.
Okay, is there a certain brand you could give us a shortcut?
I really like Mina. Mina. It's Minami. I'll put it in your podcast.
please.
Yeah,
Thank
they
you.
have a really nice one. Actually, I use a lot for patients. That is called Move EPA, and it's got curcumin in it as well, turmeric, to help with anti-inflammatory of the joints. I also use Wiley's Finest.
Omega-3.
Omega-3. They do what I like about them is they also have very small capsules. So some omegas can be quite hard to swallow,
huge.
quite big. Yeah. And so they do the mini capsules. So that's actually quite easy for patients that have an issue with that. But they do a peak EPA DHA version. I think it's something like 750.
That's rich.
Yeah, it's very rich. It's really nice. And I think the entire capsule, one capsule is 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA. So that's a really nice dose.
Yeah, it is.
And they also do, I think they do ones that are for vision as well, that have lutein and I never can pronounce the word properly because my dyslexia.
I know, XAN kind of thing.
Is that
we
the
put
other
it
one
on the
called?
screen.
Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it because I've got dyslexia. But and that's actually got quite a nice. That's quite a nice.
Omega-3 supplements are amazing for the brain. Most of us live in a very cluttered life. We go through life with no focus. How would you describe the best diet for the brain? Like, is there a certain healing food to my brain?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like you say, omegas 100% because the brain is made up of majority of fat. So that is definitely key. Anti-inflammatory, I mean, what they say about dementia, Alzheimer's, is that it's inflammaging. So we have inflammation in the brain, and actually we have something called the blood-brain barrier that is basically the protective barrier around the brain that stops the brain from basically being infiltrated by all the pathogens and all the toxins that possibly we're exposed to in the rest of our body. And what they're thinking is, and this is research that's coming out, is that the blood-brain barrier is becoming leaky, a little bit like leaky gut. So you're actually getting a leakiness in the blood-brain barrier, and you're getting these toxins enabling to actually infiltrate into the actual brain itself and cause destruction, and ultimately things like dementia, Alzheimer's, and so really it's about an anti-inflammatory diet, which is obviously what we're promoting. Lots of good, healthy omegas, muffers and puffers, polyunsaturated fatty acids, but also things like walnuts. I always love walnut because it looks like a brain, and
it does.
and it's super good for your brain. It's like it has tryptophan in it, and tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin, and serotonin is a happy neurotransmitter. It makes us feel good.
Mentioning walnuts is a story. Also, I work in supplements, and we know the authorized health claims and the non-authorized health claims, which means, vitamin C is good for your skin. That's an authorized health claim. Biotin is good for the hair. So most of authorized health claims are for vitamins and minerals. Things like collagen, even apple cider vinegar, turmeric, glucosamine, they don't, scientifically speaking, officially, they don't have any health claims. However, walnuts have authorized health claims, which is really scientifically puzzling to me, because you wouldn't say that oranges would have authorized health claims. Oranges are rich in vitamin C, and vitamin C is good for this and this and that. So you wouldn't say that.
No.
But apparently they haven't discovered yet what's in walnuts that's good for the blood.
Okay.
So it's not a certain ingredient. Surely it's a certain ingredient in walnuts that's good for the blood vessels, but they haven't discovered what.
Well, they wouldn't think it would be the tryptophan.
I'm not sure. But the authorized health claim is that walnuts are good for blood vessels.
Okay.
Actual food.
Oh.
Now it's
yeah. I mean, almonds are good for blood vessels. They stop the furring of the arteries. That's been researched. That's data. So maybe walnuts do the same, perhaps. I would say probably. I mean, the thing is that real food is that there's just so many aspects to a real food that does so many different things. But when it comes to regulation, obviously there's no money in like promoting walnuts. Is there?
No, there isn't.
But there's money in promoting statins. So we live.
Yeah, we do.